I think that's one of the really cool things about aging. It's not what I can't do, it's how I can find ways to actually do what I want to do and do it at the level I can do it and not see as that as a loss, but see that as more different and better. And that it's going to lead to more well-being in my life, a higher quality of life.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode.
Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Wayne Lehrer, and we're going to be talking about his upcoming book, The Art of Conscious Aging. Wayne is 73, and he has fully moved into the third act of his life, and we're going to be talking about what that's like, what changes have transpired over the years, what he has learned from his past, and what he is learning now. Not just in terms of physical health, but mental health and spiritual health. Wayne has an eclectic background that he's drawn on to reach this phase of his life. Now, I am 70, so I relate a lot to what Wayne is talking about in this podcast. So we're going to be talking about what things were like when we were young, the things we could do and not do, the things that we can do and not do now, and some of the things we don't want to do anymore. Since all people are constantly aging, this is not just for those who have reached certain milestones in age, but for anyone. One of the things Wayne likes to talk about is the benefits of not hanging on to old beliefs and old patterns of behavior that just don't work anymore. So let's jump into this and talk about aging. This is Wayne Lehrer. Welcome to the Exploding Human podcast.
I can't wait to see what happens to me.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Exactly. Your head will expand and your spirit will soar. And we'll get some good information out there. Here we are. We're two guys in our 70s, and we're going to be talking about aging. This just seems to have become your forte. Your joie de vivre comes through when you talk about this topic.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about joy before we even started and how your grandchildren bring that to you. And, that's one of the greatest parts about getting older. You get to have connections with, people that are so powerful because, I don't know about you, but I'm aware of my mortality the older I get. I become a little bit more aware of it, not in a morbid way.
Yeah.
But I'm aware of it. It's over the shoulder. I see it.
I think it's pivotal to finding that happiness. I think the people that are in denial of their mortality, they're never going to find that happiness.
Well, especially us living in Los Angeles, we see the incredible amount of energy, money, and effort put toward maintaining the appearance of youth, of being absolutely terrified of what happens to, the face and the body as the normal aging process goes on. And you just see these people relentlessly pursuing in a desperate way to hang on to something that it's not hang-onable to. And I just made that word up, unhang-onable.
I know for me, and maybe you had this experience, when I shaved my head the first time, which is quite a long time ago at this point, maybe 25 years ago. But I remember thinking, I really liked the way I looked for the first time. And there were no more bad hair days. I mean, I had to face it. If I wasn't looking good one day, it was an inside job. And, and all of a sudden it shifted a lot of that external desire to look good to the internal reality of like, okay, well, how I'm feeling shows up on my face every day because I can't brush my hair any better.
It's hard to brush when you don't have it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so here we are, and we're like we were just saying before we started, how both of us seem to be in the best place we've ever been in our lives. Interestingly enough, I don't have I feel that way. I don't have the energy that I did in my 20s or 30s. I also don't have the agitation that I had in my 20s or 30s. I've seen films of myself, video of myself, and I can see, this is going to sound kind of strange maybe. I can see that my life force has waned in some ways, energy-wise, but in other ways it's increased. Maybe on the appreciation level.
Energetically, we keep measuring. A lot of people, as they get older, they keep measuring themselves by their old standards. And that's a recipe for unhappiness, like rather than get obsessed with the fact that I don't have the energy, I don't have the juice, I don't repair as quickly, I don't bounce back as quickly. It's like, okay, so what do I do? How do I respond to that? And so, and as you said, you just made note of something that you do better, which is, you're more here for what you are doing. And if I'm running at 50 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour, I miss most of what's happening here. And I don't miss a lot of what's happening here anymore. I'm much more interested in showing up for it. And part of that, I think, has to do with the fact that there's a lot more time behind me than there is in front of me. So what really matters.
You couldn't have told your younger self these things in a way that would have made that younger self understand. I don't think there's thing you can understand things intellectually, but until you've actually experienced them, you can't really get what that means. People would say, well, well, the classic is money isn't everything, or it's not even, whatever percentage that we make it. And that's the classic pursuit of people. They want to get a lot of money so they can get a bunch of comfort equaling happiness in our minds. Well, I knew intellectually that that wasn't really the case, yet I still pursued, not to the point of like having it, wreck my life in any way, but I definitely thought that if I got a certain amount of money and got a certain amount of things, that would make me more calm. It does financially make you calmer, but in no other way does it do that. It just doesn't.
Well, it's that whole lie of that really is throughout our entire culture, which is not enough. And it's, money's just one little piece of it. I'm not strong enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not cool enough. I'm not smart enough. And I'm not rich enough, and all of those things we're reminded of it, on TV and social media by our friends. It's the measurement. I talk a lot about this in the book. It's the operating system for our second act, from 20 to mid 50s or 60. Those are the things you measure your success by and your value by. And when those are gone, that's a real turning point moment for most people.
When my father retired, he really took it hard in terms of his worth. And I remember saying to him, "Why don't you do some volunteer work?" And he said, "Oh, I don't want to do that." And I go, "Why?" Because there's no money in it, so there's no value in it.
Yeah.
And he actually believed it. And I really felt for him. I was just like, wow. Like, helping somebody is of less value than earning money in that scenario. And that's the way he was raised. That's what he learned. I don't fault him for that. I get it. I actually get it from the way that he came up and learned how to be in society. That really was the system.
Well, and from the time he retired to the time he passed, how long was that?
At least 25 years.
Oh, so he had a full third act that he was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because that's a relatively new thing. I mean, that's a lot of what I focus on in my book is this whole idea that, it's the first time in history that people have actually had a third act. Used to be that you were at 60, 62, you retired. And if you lived to 72, it was 10 years. And, your retirement was seeking comfort, security, living on what you'd acquired. And, and then you just slipped away. And now, you're the third act can be just as long as the second act. It can be 40 years easily.
Yes, it can be.
For most of us, it's going to be. We're going to live into our 90s or to 100, And what are we doing during that time? And unless we've come up with a new value system, right? The ways we value ourselves, whether it's giving back through becoming a volunteer, or giving back by taking your gifts, or responding to something in the world that speaks to you, that you feel that you have a value and something to offer. Short of that, there's so many issues that come up with, what is the new source of value for us.
Well, that's a really interesting thought, because what we value has to change based on time and experience and age. It all comes with the territory. The things you value when you're in elementary school, you don't think about them for a second once you become a teenager. Unless maybe you like baseball, something like that. But and then after that, it's a whole other set of things. A friend of mine says, when you're young, you're thinking about basically sex and mating, and then it's real estate, and then it's sickness. Those are the three topics.
That pretty much covers a life, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's pretty obvious, when you get our age, and some of the ways in which we decide who our friends are is how fixated they are on those really small topics that most people get fixated on in their third act, which is doctor's appointments, grandchildren, shrinking financial support, and whatever their prognosis is.
I'm sort of fascinated by this part of my life, being I guess the third act, as you would call it. The idea of I see the finite aspect of it, and yet I'm not scared of it. Thought I would be, but I'm not. And the idea that the things that I value, maybe there's other people that value the same things, and that's who I need to be around. Not trying to do something that is better suited to maybe a different age group or a different mindset, really.
And that's a big deal, because what happens is, as we age, especially as we hit 50, 60, and 70, all of a sudden the communities that we've been a part of start falling apart. You can't go and play soccer with your buddies anymore because you've had 2 knee operations, or you're not going to the work anymore, and the 5 people or 200 people that you were bumping into every day are all of a sudden gone. So that community's disappeared. And your children have moved away, and it's just you and your wife, if that even lasts. And that's another community that's disappeared. And so you really do have to ask yourself, what do I value, and what do I value in others? And start, because one of the things, especially with men, men meet most of their friends in communities of common interest. And because they just happen as a result of going to that community and then pursuing that common interest, whereas women reach out and they actually create community because they actually like a person, and they think they're interesting, or some other deeper reasons. So a lot of men end up very isolated and alone when they start to get older, because their communities have shrunk, and they didn't even notice it happened. They all happened inadvertently. The job was gone. It's fine when when you're having lunch with your buddies from work that you haven't seen in the job anymore, that you're having lunch with them once a month and stuff, but that's not the same, and that's not a community. That's a stopgap measure.
I was just thinking about, there was a scene in the movie about Schmidt. Did you ever see that movie?
I did.
Yeah. And so Jack Nicholson is the star of it, and he's an insurance salesman, career insurance salesman, decades long, and there's a retirement party, and the guy that's taking over all of his accounts comes into his office, and he has prepared cardboard boxes with the files of the clients, and really spent time, with helping this younger guy to take over his client list. And he's walking by a garage in the building I think it's maybe right after the retirement party. I don't remember the exact thing. And he sees the boxes have been put out for the trash.
Mm.
And he just looks at them. And it is the most heartbreaking moment that the thing that he valued for decades, and it was his entire life, was not only, and then he wanted to sort of have a little immortality by passing all along his hard work to this guy. And it was just trash and it was gone. And I remember thinking, wow, that is, you couldn't paint a more dismal sort of picture of retirement than that.
Yeah.
Uh, the guy's whole life was in 3 or 4 or 5 cardboard boxes, getting ready to be thrown out. Oh,
And it's a big question. I mean, one of the big things that happens for people, and I think it starts with the midlife crisis, in your mid 40s or wherever, which is, is what I'm doing have any value? Does what I'm doing have any value? And, and you sort of renegotiate that. And you haven't changed your value system yet. You haven't been forced to look at what values really matter to you in a new light yet. But I think that finding our way to continue to create value. So so a lot of people, there's another way to talk about retirement that I think a lot of us are looking at, which is the ways in which we're going to reinvent, recreate, reimagine ourselves, not as totally different creatures, but as sort of taking my lifetime's worth of interests, my lifetime worth of gifts, the various jobs I've had, and finding a new way to make an offering, to finding a new way to engage in the world with those things. I mean, historically, it's what's referred to as an elder, in other societies. The elder is somebody who's valued for what they did. And as a result of that, you go to them for that value. You don't, we don't even have role models for that here for the most part. Maybe some corporations are bringing in, mentors. They bring somebody back that has some value, but I think really that it falls on us to really create some new value, and say what it is. And, whether it's writing a book or creating a podcast, there has to be some source of value that you create in order to have meaning, bring you joy.
I always fantasized when I was working, even though I loved what I did for the most part, other than sort of the, some of the day-to-day stuff. I always thought about what it would be like to not have to work. I used to say, well, I like to work, but I don't like to have to work. And that was a big deal for me. It's like, oh, I gotta work. Well, I like what I'm doing, so it's not like I gotta, but it's like I need to go. I need to show up, and I need to do the thing, even when I don't feel like it.
Well, and I think that's one of the big changes. Now it's like, okay, well, you got more time and some independence. What do I want to do? Because not doing anything is not an option. That's just a recipe for depression and disaster.
I don't know if you've noticed this, that the pace of the way you do things, and this has nothing to do with physically slowing down that much. It's the pace that you do things is different. It used to be more hurried,
right,
and a little bit more frenzied and a little more anxiety producing. And so I like the fact that I can budget my day in a way that's a little bit slower than it used to be, and still do stuff and enjoy those things, but not always be thinking about, I got to get this done because I got to get to the next thing. That's right. A terrible feeling. I never liked that feeling. It's like, well, as soon as this is done, then I got to go do this thing. Then I got, and it's a lot of the have do's and gotta's and need to's that overwhelm people. At least, I mean, it overwhelmed me sometimes where I'm like, that's when I used to question, like, what am I doing? Am I, living to work? Is that what I'm doing? Or am I just, because that's not really what I wanted. It's not what I wanted. I wanted work to be a part of my life, but I also want to enjoy. And part of the issues that people have, particularly in the United States, is that we overwork. That's hour wise, it's ridiculous. It's just too much. It's not balanced at all.
It's this idea that if you're not running, you're not going to keep up.
Yeah.
Right.
And
that I think when you start to get some years behind you, you really, first of all, that you could sum all of that shift over into acceptance, which is I'm going to get to where I get to, and I'm going to get there with pretty much on track with what I want to achieve. Why push? Why constantly push and create sorrow and heartache and leaving dead bodies in my wake and all the other things that I did when I'm trying to achieve and acquire and accumulate, when in fact, hey, I've it all came anyways. It not very much of it came as a result of trying 20 or 50% harder. And when I realized that, all of a sudden it was like, okay, I can break my day into this thing that I enjoy doing and this thing that I enjoy doing and this thing that I love doing, and I can have a full life as opposed to a work life and then exhaustion.
Yeah, I remember hearing about other countries where they would take a very long lunch break and a nap and then go back to work later.
Yeah.
Like 2-3 hours in the middle of the day. I'm like, well, why don't we all just agree to do that? That sounds good. But we don't agree to that. It's like, well, while you're doing that, you're either going to get fired or, while you're doing that, I'm going to get ahead and I'm going to beat you. And then you'll get fired or you won't make as much money or whatever it is. But we don't agree on that. It's an interesting cultural idea that more work is better.
Well, and it's back to this idea again that enough is never enough. When I used to be a producer and a director, I had my three laws of producing. The first one was the vision is everything. No one messes with it. Everybody furthers it. The second thing was momentum is everything. It's the hardest thing to get and the easiest thing to lose. And the word wasn't acceleration. It was momentum. In other words, the thing, once you get it moving, it's going to stay moving. And the third thing was, what will you settle for? Because if you're not settling for it, then you're creating heartache and you're beating yourself up for unnecessary stuff. I don't know. I adapted that fairly young. Certainly when I was in the film business, it was the only way to be there and not drive myself crazy. Guys that are super perfectionists, maybe their work turns out better. Maybe it doesn't, maybe they have no friends in the world, and everybody on the set tells absolutely horrendous stories about them, because they're dictators or, whatever. And okay, in the name of art, that's, but that's part of our culture. This idea that you can't achieve without running somebody over, winning at somebody else's expense. That all changes. One of the qualities I see is organizing your day better or differently as you get older and not being in this frantic rush is this idea of the joy of collaborating and the joy of being part of a community and the joy of interaction. And that out of that can grow extraordinary, works of art, extraordinarily successful businesses. And we're finally seeing that with businesses like Trader Joe's or Tom's Shoes or, all the ones that have made a mark in the world, that they're much, they're based on a whole different principle, which is, if everybody's happy here, we're going to do okay. One of the things, I don't know if you know this, but at Trader Joe's, you do the same job for 1 hour at a time. There's 3 jobs you do there, and you never do the same job for more than 1 hour at a time. And it's like, wow, what a respect. And the one you do the best. So some people are best with people. Some people are best with stocking. Some people are best with cash register, whatever it is. The one you do the best is the one you get an extra hour or 2 hours a day of.
I didn't know they did it like that. I know the employees seem pretty happy there.
Yeah, they've been valued and they're not bored to death.
Yeah, you get to move around and work with different people and do.
Exactly.
It's like, I hate this. Okay, well, you'll be done in 20 minutes, so don't worry about it.
Exactly. And we're going to value you for it now.
Plus, you get to wear the Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah, right. A real bonus.
It really is. So you wrote when did you start writing the book, and how did that happen? Well, first let's say the title again, because I'll say the title in the intro because we haven't mentioned that yet, but let's say the title again. And then tell us how you got into that.
The title is The Art of Conscious Aging. And the subtitle is The Operating System for an Extraordinary Third Act. I've been teaching yoga and meditation for a long time. And I was asked to go on a retreat with the USC School of Gerontology the dean of that school is one of my private students that I taught yoga and meditation to. And so he brought me on this retreat. And on that retreat, my relationship with him deepened, and I met the president of AARP and the top person in the field of fitness for our generation, somebody who sold $500 million worth of exercise equipment and videos. And so she invented exercise videos in the 70s. And those three people have become three of my very best friends in the world. But that was 10 years ago. I had no idea I was going to write that book. And then about 6 years ago, two women that I speak to every Wednesday, we sort of have a mastermind group where we support each other. And they kept saying, you're like the most energetic, you're the youngest, you look amazing for your age. You should write a book on aging. And yeah, thanks. And all of a sudden I had written a previous book and I really love writing. So, I started writing and, I had taken a class in writing a nonfiction before. And basically it was just a calling, it just kind of took me over. I sat down, I came up with 90 chapter titles and then just randomly started writing about them. All these things that occurred to me as a result of a lifetime's worth of experience and the struggle. But the thing that really put it over the top for me was at that same time, about 6 or 7 years ago, I was in this sort of low grade depression. Let's be frank. I was depressed.
You're the first. You're the very first.
Thank you. My doctor sent me to a psychologist who specialized in, geriatric psychology, and I went there and started talking, and it really wasn't very helpful. About 6 months into the therapy with the guy, I thought we were going to enter this dialogue because I thought I was the perfect guinea pig for him to really learn something about gerontology because he was 50 still. He didn't know. And I have to say, as a result of writing the book and meeting so many people that I've talked to about it and courses that I've led and coaching that I've done, that most people don't really confront the issues of aging until around 60. That's when sort of mortality and the amount of time you have left and your body starts speaking to you in ways you never want to listen to, and your kids start moving. So all of the things that sort of pile up at once. What I realized while I was there with him was that my problem wasn't that I was depressed. Depression was a byproduct of what my problem was. And my problem was that I had not been able to make the transition from this operating system of achieving and acquiring and accumulating and competing and succeeding to whatever this new phase of life was. There are no role models. On the cover of AARP a couple months ago, it says, Tom Cruise, 57, still does his own stunts. So, right, and most of the things that we see about people that are older is how they're still in their second act. We're hardly ever presented with the value that they now have as a result of the wisdom that they've garnered and the transition that they've gone through, this new thing they've created. I mean, like Jimmy Carter, for example, is a perfect example of he's far more extraordinary after he left office than when he was in office. And, he created this transformation, same thing with Bill Clinton, and they're valued for that, but, they're in the exceptional range. I started really looking at, what it was that I needed to value now. And so I call that transition the third act identity crisis. And it's, just like between our first and our second act, where we're going from living in our parents' house and we're dependent to going away to school, getting a job, getting married, finding our own identity and becoming independent. And there's tons of role models for that transition. Plus, it's easy. You go to school, you go to work, your parents kick you out, you got to do it. What do you do when all of a sudden, what do you got to do, or what is presented to you when all of a sudden you leave your job? But the Barco Lounger or golf, these are not the only options available, and yet they're the only ones that were regularly presented. And as I started really looking at what those things were that I needed to confront and how I needed to stop judging myself for the fact that, I've been a mountain runner for years. I can't run anymore. And I had a knee operation. But I can hike, and hiking brings me all the same joy. And just sort of like you said, Hiking also brings new joys, which is I'm far more present for the beauty. I can do it with a friend and we can talk the whole time if I want to, or I can go alone and it can be a meditation. And instead of the mountain beating the crap out of me, which is the truth of what it was when I did it. And I loved that, which is great for a 25-year-old to run 7 to 15 miles and and prove their mettle against this impossible thing. Well, that doesn't do it for me anymore. It doesn't turn me on, doesn't get me excited. The solution was to begin to make this transition and to measure my worth by completely new endeavors. It turns out that writing the book is my third act purpose. I was somehow the right person in the right place at the right time, heard the calling.
You took some of the things with you from Act 2 into Act 3, and then the ones you either didn't want to or couldn't take, you left those behind. So it's not like you have to get rid of everything. You just have to take the things that serve you still, and that you can still do, you take those with you and add some new stuff.
The first book I wrote is called The Prodigy Within, The Quest to Discover Your Life's Purpose for Late Bloomers and Other Seekers. And the idea of that was it's not until mid to late life that you've accumulated enough life experience, been in jobs you didn't like, but somehow the universe put you there. So you accumulated very specific skills. And I just believe that all of that is sort of magically orchestrated. And if I look at it that way, then later in life, all those pieces fit together in a very unique way. And I believe that that's the offering that we make that truly brings us value in our third act. So if we look at Jimmy Carter again, he had the ability to pull people together, to make executive decisions. He saw what was missing, in one part of society, that he could have an answer to. We're repurposing so many aspects of who we are and finding a way to almost take them up an octave. When you start really accepting the third act, you go, oh, I'm so glad I don't have to do all that other crap anymore. And I can just sort of float based upon my interests and my passions and the people that I want to hang around. And I'm sure you found this too. I mean, I have the best friends that in my life that I've ever had, the most interesting people in my life. And a lot of them, some of them I have things in common with, but most of them, they're just people that have taken their life and fashioned something that's really engaging and intriguing. And I want to be next to the juice that spills off from that. And I want to share that juice with them. That's why I believe that collaborating, Francis Ford Coppola says that collaboration is the sex of creativity. There's something of real value in an open dialogue where no one's identity is at risk.
My favorite thing is to sit around with people and talk about cool stuff. Because something new comes out of it. That's why I love this podcast. I get to meet the most interesting people doing things all over the world, really. By the way, there are a lot of people doing a lot of cool stuff of all shapes and sizes, all ages, everywhere. Yeah. It is a very interesting world if you want to focus on those kinds of things and not the things that are being presented to us in the media that are divisive and mean-spirited, and that most people aren't that. That's my experience. Certainly doing this, most people aren't that. Most people are very kind and interested in doing things, and they want to help and they want to be of service to the world in some way, or at least contribute in some way. And that's what I've found. It keeps me, much more positive than focusing on that other stuff, which to me is a big waste of time. It's a very short little window that you're walking around as a human being. It's very short. It becomes more apparent the older you get, how short of a blink of an eye this, life is. And so why waste 1 second with negativity and all that other stuff? It just doesn't work. Yeah. And it doesn't help anyone.
So most of the communities that we're part of, we've been put into, like at school, I'm thrown into a class with you, or I'm thrown into a sporting event with you. At work, we've been given projects. And so, yes, okay, so we find some people along the way. But what about as when you're older and you're not in that, and you actually reach out or do something like what you're doing, creating a podcast, all of a sudden, these are people that are completely different than you, and yet living life with the same modus operandi, the same interests, which is, to find joy, to share it with others, to create value in the world. Reaching out for them is, I believe, one of the high points of aging. And a lot of people miss out on it.
One of the best parts about retirement to me, or being retired from my old sort of have to go to a job thing, is that I don't have to hang out with anyone I don't really want to. How great is that?
Yeah.
Nobody tells you that when you're young. When you're young, like there's going to come a point that you don't have to hang out with anybody you don't want to.
The sideline to that is a lot of the reasons you hung out with people that you didn't want to before was what they were going to do for you, how they were going to move your career forward, what value they were going to you were going to get out of the situation. And losing that as a reason for hanging out with people opens the world up to a whole new set of really wonderful reasons to hang out.
That's a huge gift to me. I love that about my day. And I get up and I know I don't have to be somewhere that I don't want to be. If I don't have to, I mean, obviously there's certain things you have to do to live life. Yet there are still obviously some have tos, but for the most part, like I don't have to spend 8 hours a day with people that I would rather not spend time with.
Well, one of the things that we don't think about also when we're younger, because we're usually pulled into other people's stuff where we're one of the spokes in somebody else's wheel, and we're not necessarily the hub. When we get older, like you doing this podcast, you're now the hub at the center of the hub, and you pull people in. So the people that you get to pull in, not only are they people you want to hang out with, but they make for a really amazing and interesting community. And so one of the things I talk about a lot in the book is as people find what their true purpose is in later life, they get to be surrounded with the people that they want to play with. And then when they get pulled into other wheels, they're pulled in for their gift, not necessarily by how it's going to move the thing forward.
Mm-hmm.
It changes everything. As child, it's dependence. In the second act, it's independence. In the third act, it's interdependence.
Let's talk about some of the other things besides what we've been talking about in terms of aging that help us to keep a vital third act going. And I'm talking about exercise and diet. And what are some of the things that you talk about in the book that really helped you and that, I think helped me, which are the two things I've just mentioned. But, I spend a lot of time, because I have it, I have it now, to think about how do I want to take care of my body. That's a big piece of, to me, mental health at this point. I mean, there was a lot of times I was working so much, I was like, I don't have time. I can't. I mean, I'm doing yoga now for the first time in 30 years. I'm back doing it after, a long hiatus, more like closer to 40 years. I haven't done, and I started about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, back to doing it. And it's a big part of my day now.
It's a great question. And I would put it under sort of, so before I talk about those things individually, I think what's really critical when you're older is really understanding how important balance is. So, one of the first chapters in my book is called It's Not Negotiable. When you're young, everyth's negotiable. You want to stay out all night? No problem. You want to stay out 2 nights in a row? No problem. You want to stay out 3 nights in a row and then go to work and get that report done, get on the red eye, deliver it in New York, hit a home run and come back home and go to a party that night? No problem. You want to eat French fries? No. When you're older, the margin of error becomes smaller and smaller. So critical to that is, how do I take care of myself? Because if my margin of error, like, for example, one of the things I discovered was I only need 6.5 hours of sleep, but I need them before 9:45 at night. If I get them after 10:30, I'm tired the next day, and 9 hours won't do it for me. Now, I'm not saying that's for everybody, but that's one of the things being self-reflective that's become obvious to me. Now, I can either keep lying about to myself, which will cause me to suffer at 73, which is, no, that's just a momentary thing. It's going to pass. No, it's every night, almost every night. So this idea of balance is critical, and recognizing what's no longer negotiable. If you played basketball with your buddies your whole life and all of a sudden you got knee issues and you're still doing it, that's called suffering. It's not called joy. It's not called doing something I love anymore. Now, but a lot of people keep perpetuating a lot of those things they've done their whole life. So when it comes to diet and exercise and sleep and rest and where we spend our time, we have to reassess all of those things. So one of the other markers, one of the things I believe about getting older is to get older well. The art of conscious aging is the art of using your body and your circumstances as a litmus test for everything you do now, which is, what's the payoff? What's the price of admission for going to bed at 10:30 at night? Now, maybe I get to stay out an hour later. Great. But what I say I want to write a book, and the next day I'm unavailable to write the book because I'm hungover, or I'm exhausted, or I'm tired, or I'm in a fog. Same thing if I eat wheat, So we have to look at all those things that do and don't work. And part of the assumption I've made is that the people that do that actually makes you become a more conscious, mindful person. So if you want to pay attention to how to age, that the art of that is like getting the feedback system that you now have instant feedback, right? There was no such thing as instant feedback when I was young. I could get away with anything for as long as I wanted. Now, if I exercise 15 minutes too much, I can kiss the afternoon of my day goodbye. That's happened to you, I'm sure. You thought, oh, this feels great. I can do it. And all of a sudden you go, oh my God, I got to lay down. I'm exhausted. Rather than be sensitive enough to go, okay, that's enough. It's never going to make me skinny enough, beautiful enough, or sexy enough again. That no longer being the motivation. And here's the motivation for diet and exercise when you're older is, can I maintain the best level of well-being and quality of life to do all the other stuff I really want to do? Or am I going to compromise that? So back to exercise specifically, I think that the exercises that are not brutal on your body, so from running to walking or hiking or skating, flowing exercises like yoga, tai chi, qigong are really great because, all of a sudden what's happened is all the exercises you did before were pounding, angular, and they burned. So those same things, seeking those same things, looking for a burn at the gym is gonna have a very high price of admission for tomorrow. Now, if I build up to it nice and slowly because I'm staying balanced and I really hone my diet, then I can get away with that. So it's really just this chance to be super mindful. And so that's the exercise part. So basically, I swim, I happen to I'm in a meditation group 5 days a week in the morning, and it's 7 a.m. So before I go to the group, I swim from 6 to 7 in the morning. By 8 o'clock, I've taken care of two of the most essential parts of my day. I'm spiritually attuned and I'm physically invigorated. Now, I know for swimming, if I swim 35 minutes on most days, I'm good to go the rest of the day. If I swim 45 or 50 minutes, I can be tired in the afternoon. So why do I need to do that? Now, as a young person, I need to do it because I'm not going to get the body I want, the looks I want, the weight I want, the girl I want, or any of that kind of stuff. But that's not what I want anymore. I've let go of those parameters.
Well, there's less energy to discharge.
Exactly. But still, most people are still doing it because it's the idea they've got in their head that this is what exercise is. Exercise is going for the burn. Exercise is keeping up with somebody else on the next yoga mat over. Okay, that person's 30 years younger than you, and they didn't take 40 years off. There's a saying, I know you've known it, compare, despair. That's freaking a bullet to your head when you're older. You got to really say what works for me. And, in the book, I talk about diet stuff. I don't talk about diet specifically, but I talk about the things that you really need to know when you're older. And for me, they boil down to three things. One is you want to eat an anti-inflammatory diet. You want to stay away from inflammatory foods because all disease is caused as a result of inflammation. When you're younger and you're burning all the time, inflammation doesn't tend to build up. Also, inflammation builds up in places that aren't being moved as much. And when you're older, you're not moving stuff as much. So, like, for example, arthritis, that inflammation, if I'm eating inflammatory foods, then my arthritis is going to go through the ceiling. If I've limited the foods that are inflammatory, and that brings us to the second one. The second one is foods that are acidic versus alkaline. The body needs to be a certain level of alkalinity. It's basically, the number they say is 7.0, which is the same level that healthy blood is supposed to be, and the same level of alkalinity of the ocean. What a surprise, right? So most people, as they get older, their level of alkalinity goes down into the 4s or the 5s or maybe 6. Their acidic alkalinity, the acid level is way up. And all of that stuff causes dis-ease in the physical body. The other thing is, the final thing is really staying balanced with your diet, which is not overeating, not overindulging. So when you expand those other ideas of acidity and anti-inflammatory, then all of a sudden, now it used to be a couple of years ago, they said 1 glass of red wine a day was really great. Now they've proved that any amount of alcohol at all is bad for the body, especially an older body. If you notice, every time you go into the doctor, highest on the list of things they ask you is, how often do you drink and do you smoke? Both of which cause complete acidic state in the body, both of which are inflammatory. And we could go down the list, wheat, all of those things. So, but again, it comes down to balance. Yeah, you can get away with that stuff once in a while, but if you're doing it regularly, you're going to pay a big price. And if I'm paying a big price, then I don't get to show up for the quality of life I want at this age, which could all come under the term ease, not easy, but moving through the world with ease, with grace.
You were talking about comparing yourself to other people, so I take these yoga classes, and the people are much younger than I am. Most of them are at least 30 years younger than I am, maybe more. Most of them more, actually. And I don't really compare myself to them, but I do compare myself to myself.
Yeah.
Which I don't want to do that either, because there's days I can do things and there's days I can't do the exact same things I did the day before. And I push sometimes. This is all ego stuff. You did it before, you can do it again, or you're strong enough to do that now. And other people are doing it. I'm not watching them and saying they're doing it better or worse, but that's the routine that's being shown to me right now. And if I can't do it, that means I'm failing in some way. And to learn, I've had to learn to stop when my body says, don't do it. That's, and so I'm very protective of, my right knee is kind of messed up sometimes. So I don't do things because that would affect my knee. I just won't do it, even though maybe everybody else is doing it, but their knee isn't screwed up.
So one of the big challenges with aging is to not let your world get smaller. So what happens for a lot of people as they age, I can't do that anymore. I don't like that anymore. I don't want to hang out with her anymore. And all of a sudden, there's a lot of things that we're not doing. We've got a lifetime of experience, a lifetime of wounds, a lifetime of trauma. And also, we're in the place now that we can decide who we want to and who we don't want to be around. And we may not be making the choice. We may only be making the choice of what we don't want, as opposed to consciously making the choice about what we do want.
Yeah.
Big deal, right? So you just really put your finger on a couple of things. One is, if I listen to my own body, I can't not work with my knee, because that won't serve it either. What can I do there that doesn't exacerbate my problem, but does strengthen, support, and initiate some level of healing? And really pay attention, which is becoming a more conscious, mindful person. It's practicing loving kindness towards myself. And the other thing is that then my world isn't going to keep getting smaller either. So like you going back to yoga, a lot of people would go back and after three classes, they're so disappointed either what they can't do anymore or what other people in the room are doing or what somebody their age in the room is doing who's been practicing for 40 years. I just took a class. I haven't taken a class from somebody else in maybe 7 years. And at my gym, I just thought one day, I'm going to take a yoga class. Literally 7 years since I took a class. Mm-hmm. I've been teaching all the way through. I teach people I can do the most insane poses. Day one was so humbling, and I didn't do anything. I've been teaching so long. I know I didn't do anything I didn't want to do. And when I needed a rest, I either went to child's pose or I sat down on my heels and waited for my energy to come back, or I did it at half the level and found the way to do it in the body that I'm bringing into the room on that day. And that's different every day. If I ate, 900 calories yesterday versus 3,000 calories, I'm going to bring a completely different body into the room. If I ate inflammatory food yesterday, and I don't think about all this stuff in my mind. All you got to do is really pay attention to the moment. Oh, I can't push that far in that pose. And I think that's one of the really cool things about aging. It's not what I can't do. It's how I can find ways to actually do what I want to do and do it at the level I can do it and not see that as a loss, but see that as more different and better. And that it's going to lead to more well-being in my life, a higher quality of life.
Yoga is such a great analogy to all of it too, because what actually is the goal of that? It's not a gymnastic sort of twistoid, look what I can do. It's how do I feel when I'm done? And if I've hurt myself, I don't feel good.
Well, the language and yoga being a really good example, it says, now we're gonna work this pose. You don't work any poses in yoga. Now we're doing yoga. No, ideally in yoga, you're being. It's the practice of being present, being in the pose as opposed to doing it. So if you're busy doing it, what's happening if I'm busy doing a pose in yoga? I'm living in not enough.
Yes.
Because I'm trying to get somewhere else with the pose rather than being in the one I can do. And from there, letting it evolve to what else it's going to be. And that's why a lot of these forms of exercise, like I talked about, yoga, qigong, tai chi, dancing, these are all things that we do because they, like you said, they make us feel good. Because there's the parameters on them are, if I do it this much, it's not going to feel good anymore. It's not going to bring me joy, and it's going to impact my life in negative ways. I don't want to do that.
So I really enjoyed talking to you, Wayne. Let's mention the book again so folks can get it.
The book is called The Art of Conscious Aging. It's not out yet. It's currently being prepared to come out, but they can go to my website, which is waynelehrer.com, and download parts from the book. One of the big things, as I shared with you, that's come out of it is that I see that one of the biggest challenges for most of the people I know is making that transition. And I'm sort of dedicated at this point to, whether it's through classes or through one-on-one coaching people through that transition to find acceptance for where they're at now and how to really have a quality of life, whatever body and mind they find themselves in their 50s, 60s, or 70s.
Well, folks, if you're in this age group and you're looking for this kind of wisdom, Wayne's your guy. Wayne's your guy. I'm going to spell your name for them. WayneLehrer.com. Wayne Lehrer. It's a tricky name. You could misspell it if you didn't have me to help, folks. So you had me to help. WayneLehrer.com. Thanks so much, Wayne. Have a fantastic evening. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Always.
Thank you, Bob. It was really wonderful. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website is theexplodinghuman.com. There is also a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, big thanks to Wayne Lehrer for being on the show. Check him out at waynelehrer.com. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.